Tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata viramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Adinādāna viramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Kāmesu miccācārā viramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Musāvādā viramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Suramīra majjapamā daṭṭhāna viramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Itipiso bhagavā araham sammā sambuddho vijjācarana sampanno sugato lokavidu. Anuttaro purisa dhammasarathi sattha deva manussanam buddho swakhato bhagavata dhammo sanditthiko akaliko ehi passiko opanayiko paccattang veditabbo viññohiti. Supatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho ujjupatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho ñāyapatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho sāmīci patipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho yadidam cattari purisa yugani attha purisa puggala esa bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Ahuneyo pahuneyo dakhineyo anjali karaniyo anuntaram punyakhettam lokas sati. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, now let's take a few moments to relax our body and calm the mind. Understanding your sitting posture. Releasing any tension and negative energies from your body. As you take a few deep inhalations and exhalations, as you feel your entire body with the mind, being very friendly to yourself and very gentle to yourself. You may wish yourself and bless yourself for your physical and mental well-being. May I be well, happy, peaceful and relaxed. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be relaxed, may I be peaceful. And extending your loving thoughts, compassionate thoughts towards all living beings in the world, in the universe, wishing all living beings in all directions, broadening your heart and broadening your mind, feeling the deep sense of connectedness with all beings. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be relaxed. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, let's start our. It should be. Okay, let's start our Dhamma discussion now. So today I selected this very popular, very famous discourse, Vatthupama Sutta, the simile of the cloth. The sutta comes in the Majjhima Nikaya. It is the seventh discourse in the middle length discourses. So this special discourse explains the teachings about the mental defilements or mental impurities, and what are these mental impurities and how they influence the human mind, and the purpose of the Dhamma practice, the purpose of the Buddha's spiritual path as the way to completely eradicate all these mental impurities or defilements. So this is the brief idea about this Vatthupama Sutta. So let's see how the discourse starts. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was staying at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There he addressed the monks thus. Monks, when versed, they replied, the Blessed One said this: Monks, suppose a cloth were stained and dirty, and a dryer dipped it in some dye or other, whether blue or yellow or red or pink. It would take the dye badly and be impure in color. And why is that? Because the cloth was not clean. So too, monks, when the mind is defiled, an unhappy destination may be expected. So, it simply explains about the simile of the cloth, right, which is very clear, very simple, as Buddha explains this in the beginning. If someone is to color a piece of cloth which is very dirty and which is not clean, trying to dye it with different colors, no matter what, that piece of cloth will not dye perfectly. Why? Because that piece of cloth is uncleaned. Uncleaned. It's dirty. Therefore, it doesn't absorb the color, whatever the color the dyer wants to have on the piece of cloth. So similarly, when the mind is defiled, when our human mind, our mind is impure, or if our mind is contaminated by the negative mental conditions, and we call them the defilements, Kilesa in Pali, we call mental impurities, then an unhappy destination may be expected. So, what it simply means, the destination clearly explains actually that person's rebirth. So, if someone dies with an impure mind, with a mind of these mental defilements, that person is going to be born in an unhappy place, a lower realm of existence. So that is a very basic teaching in the Buddha's teachings, as we have learned in many of the discourses. So it is just like that piece of cloth. So it is a kind of what we can expect, right? Having such a condition, what would be the outcome? What would be the expectation of having such a mind, right? So, and then the Lord Buddha continues, monks, suppose a cloth were clean and bright, and a dyer dipped it in on some dye or other, whether blue or yellow or red or pink. It would take the dye well and be pure in color. And why is that? Because the cloth was clean. So too, monks, when the mind is undefiled, a happy destination may be expected. So, in opposite to the first teaching, he explains the very clear Dhamma fact with the simile, still with the simile of the cloth. If someone takes a pure piece of cloth, which is very bright, and trying to dip it in different colors, no matter what, so it would take that color very easily, and it will be very bright in that color, because it is the original piece of cloth was very clean. So that's why. So similarly, when the mind is undefiled, when the mind is free from these negative mental conditions, defilements, a happy destination may be expected, which means the rebirth process will be, the rebirth will be a happy one. That person can expect a happy destination. So here we can generally understand it, even though it explains as a happy destination and unhappy destination. According to the teachings, we can see with that explanation, it is not only the rebirth, right? According to the teachings, as we all are looking for the happiness, the peace and tranquility in our everyday life, right? As we all are expecting this positive level of existence, and eventually, finally, the goal of this spiritual path, which is the enlightenment, the realization of the truth, and all these things are implied there, right? So these goals can never be achieved with a defiled mind, with a mind of different mental impurities, right? So therefore, we need to understand that concept generally. Yeah. It does not simply mean only the rebirth. Okay, and then Buddha explains what are these mental impurities, what are these negative mental conditions, defilements. I have given you the second paper. So Buddha explains about 16 different mental impurities, defilements. So if we are to understand the general concept of these mental impurities, kilesa, right? So in the teachings, according to the Buddha's teachings, we generally understand one of the goals in this spiritual path, spiritual practice, is to completely purify one's mind from these mental impurities. Why? Because the teachings explain that we go through so many different negativities, unhappiness, suffering, due to these mental impurities, negative conditions, mental conditions. So therefore, if one can completely control or completely let go, completely eradicate these mental impurities, that is the way to everlasting peace and happiness. So therefore, we can see in the teachings, the ultimate goal of the practice is to purify one's mind from these different mental impurities, right? So this is a very important thing to learn, right? In general, people, we think that our happiness is from these external conditions, right? When we have something, when we have these beautiful, positive things around us, this is the way to happiness, right? They can bring us what we are looking for in our life. So in that understanding, people are always obsessed with these external conditions. You know, the money, cars, and beautiful houses, and all these things, even the relationships, because they matter. They think that their happiness is in these external conditions. But in the spiritual understanding, Buddha teaches here that our true happiness is gained through the mental purification. When our mind is free from these negative conditions, mostly the negative emotions, so that is bringing us the true happiness, the inner peace and tranquility, right? So it does not mean that we need these external things, but eventually what brings us the most meaningful happiness is when our mind is pure, when our mind is free from these negative mental conditions. So we need to understand this common aspect, common teaching in the Dhamma in relation to these defilements. So what is the meaning of talking about these defilements? Because it sounds very pessimistic for some people when they hear about these negative mental conditions, defilements, because we all have them, you know. But without talking about them, without getting to know about them, we cannot simply control them. We cannot completely let go of them. So therefore, we can find very special teachings, sometimes very deep analysis about these mental impurities, defilements, you know, how they work, how they manifest in our day-to-day life, and how they bring us the tension, anxieties, and other negativities into our everyday life. So then we can directly see that the ultimate purpose of this entire spiritual path is to completely eradicate all these defilements from the mind. Okay. So for that purpose, the Lord Buddha explains about 16 mental impurities. So these are very important to take a look. You know, the first one, covetousness and unrighteous greed. So these explanations, these meanings are actually coming from the two very important books in the Tripitaka. One is the Papancha Sudani, the commentary to Majjhima Nikaya, which is the middle length discourses. So that is the first one, and the other one is coming in the Abhidhamma, the Vibhanga Prakarana. So that is where some of these commentaries are taken from. So we can take a closer look at these different mental impurities. Right. The first one is called the Abhijja Visama Lobha in Pali, covetousness and unrighteous greed. So there are two terms, two mental impurities to understand. The first one is the covetousness, so which is the attachment for one's own belongings, so what one has in possession. You know, if one has such deep attachment, craving, desire for one's own possessions, can be anything, any material thing, immaterial thing. So that is called the covetousness, the abhijja. And the other one is called the unrighteous greed. It is the greed and attachment for the craving for others' possession. That means why it is wrong, it is unright, it is not ethical, you know, to desire for others' possessions. You know, people have wish, you know, to take away others' possessions, like, you know, steal things sometimes. You know, it's as a mental impurity, negative mental condition. People have that the greed, that emotional attachment for others' possession. So these are coming together actually as a pair, covetousness and unrighteous greed. Uh, so we can sometimes we can understand that the first one sounds a little bit okay, right? It is something we have achieved sometimes with our effort, dedications. But still, if we emotionally, if we get too much attached to these things, we can go through some other negative experiences, unnecessary things, right? What do you think people can experience with unnecessary attachment or craving for what they have?
They try hard to protect what they
Right, yeah. The sense of insecurity, right? That's a huge thing, for people. They always want to protect it. The fear, worries, anxieties, all this there. When you have so many things to protect, take care, even, right? To have a bigger house, right? It's not easy to take care. So it doesn't mean that you can have these things, you can enjoy these things, but if you unnecessarily get attached to them, emotionally get attached to them, that you cannot leave them sometimes. When something breaks down, you cannot stand that. You can really get upset, disturbed by that. So these are the negative conditions, that one can go through due to this emotional attachment to one's own possession. Even though it sounds okay, there are some negative outcomes, consequences, right? And sometimes we learn that, if someone dies, as it explains right in the beginning of the discourse, to expect unhappy destination, right? So we learn when some people die with too much attachment, emotional attachment to their possession, sometimes for their children, for their houses, the jewelries, money, and all these things. There are so many different stories that have happened to them to be born as like hungry ghosts and this negative realm of existence due to that emotional craving, attachment to these possessions. It clearly, directly explained in many of the stories in the teachings. So that is the first one. First, mental impurity, covetousness and unrighteous greed. The second one is ill will. So we can see several upcoming conditions. Mental impurities are kind of connected together, having kind of same base or root. The ill will, vyapada, it is the aversion, the different types of aversions. And you can see the next one is anger, right? So there's a slight difference there. Ill will and anger. The ill will is a kind of, if you are to understand the anger, it is mostly very superficial. It can come and go away very easily, very superficial level. You can easily get angry, you can get easily irritated, but after a moment it can go away, depending on many different conditions, right? But the ill will is a kind of staying there for some time, so you can be very angry about different experiences, different conditions. People, it doesn't easily go away from you. It kind of dwells in your mind, So that type of aversion is explained in different places, in different ways. Like, if you see that someone is blaming a friend of yours, very close friend of yours, right? So you get angry about that person, right? And also the opposite. If you hear someone is praising someone that is not dear to you, or maybe your enemy that you consider, so you have that anger, aversion there. So that type of different aversions are experienced in human life, from time to time. And then anger is a very usual general irritation of the mind. Very temporary. It can be very temporary. Anger, being angry, angriness, hatred, hating, hatefulness, irritation, irritability, and so on, which is the superficial level of the anger, right? And resentment, upanaha, which is the hostility, that is also another aspect of anger, right? The hostility. It is the accumulation, persistence, strengthening of anger. So these are some levels of anger, aversion. Okay, and then contempt, makka in Pali. It is the disregard favors done towards oneself, right? So sometimes you can get some help from someone, right? So suppose you can be very poor in the beginning and you get some help from someone to reach some higher level of your standard of your life, right? Getting a good job or getting a good education. So once you get these benefits, you think that, oh, I did all these things by myself. And no one did these things for me. That is the disregard of others' favors, what others have done to you. So that is the contempt. Okay, so it can be happening in so many different ways in human life, and then insolence, palasa, the sense of competitiveness. Okay, that is to overpowering someone else, to overpower someone else, to go beyond someone's skills, can be positions, knowledge, skills, and all these things, reputation, everything, so people have desire for that, right? So that is also another mental impurity. And then the envy, issa in Pali, issa, envy, which is the general idea of the envy as we always understand, right? That arises towards the gain, honor, respect, esteem, veneration, and reverence shown towards others. So you cannot simply stand those things. You envy. To see someone is smiling, living a happy life, being very famous and dear to others. So you cannot simply stand them. You become very uncomfortable. People really get disturbed by seeing others' happiness, others' well-being, physical and mental well-being. So that is the envy. And then avarice, which is maccharya, which is the stinginess. Stinginess is also a very common mental impurity which comes from the root of that attachment for things, right? Stinginess, meanness, and so there are different words to explain that. Unwillingness to share, right? Stinginess regarding dwellings, families, gains, praise, and dhamma. These things can happen even in the spiritual community too. So suppose you all are meditating in one sitting, as a group. So if someone sees that one person is sitting very comfortably for maybe an hour or so without moving, like a rock, without opening eyes, without moving at all. So sometimes seeing such a person, someone can feel that mental impurity, can develop that envy as a mental impurity. Something happened. It's okay. So that is a very common mental impurity people experience, right? So it can happen even in the spiritual experience too. Hmm? Maybe if someone is very knowledgeable in the Dhamma, having certain positive qualities even. So one can still envy such people, such experiences. So it is not only in the lay community, even it can happen in this, especially in this discourse, it explains in these different levels, different areas, how these mental impurities can be manifesting, because they are very deceiving. These mental impurities are very subtle to understand. They come in disguise even. Therefore they can really deceive someone. So in that case, we don't identify them easily. We don't recognize them right away. So we can get controlled by these mental impurities very easily. So, and then deceit. Deceit is the Maya, which is someone misbehaves with the body, by speech, by mind for the purpose of concealing it. That is the idea of the Maya, deceit. That means you have the intention of deceiving someone, covering your misbehavior or any other negative conditions, qualities in yourself, by speech, by behaving, and even in your mind, the way you think. So that is also another mental impurity. And the next one is the fraud. Sateya. It explains as someone is fraudulent, utterly fraudulent. This is called fraud. So it's like tricking others, trying to mislead someone, right? It is the simple idea. Okay, and also obstinacy, tambha, which is the stiffness, harshness, single-mindedness, inflexibility. So obstinacy is a very, it can be a very subtle but common defilement. Being very stubborn in that sense. Being very stiff. In one's personality, characteristic. Because of different conditions, qualities in life, people can become obstinate very easily without knowing. So as a mental impurity, that can lead to many other negative mental impurities. So we can see how these things are interacting. Interacting with one another, leading to some other mental impurities as a result of having only one mental impurity. So they are kind of connected. And the 12th is the rivalry. Sarambha. This is twofold, as unwholesome and wholesome. The unwholesome is a layman sees another person dressed up in ornaments, and there arises in him the thought of surpassing the other person to fall. Okay, so that is to kind of to surpass someone, to go beyond, even still here in that superficial level, right? So one way is to look at other people, how they behave, how they live, and to exceed them, go beyond their standards, their qualities, conditions. So in the layman, in household life, it can happen in that way. A monk hears another who has learned so much Dhamma or speaks so much, and by way of conceit thinks to outdo the other twofold or threefold, right? So that can happen in the spiritual community as well, right? So you may try to apply that in different ways, in your practice also without knowing. but it's a mental impurity in the bottom line, in a subtle way. And the wholesome way, how it works is that, but when a layman sees another give a gift, and from a desire to give, thinks that he himself should give 2 or 3 gifts. So it's a kind of positive. So we can see that happens in the spiritual community too. In a congregation, people are very competitive in the merit-bringing activities too. But still, they are positive. They are helping them. But in a subtle form, it's a mental impurity, negative condition in the mind, right? That is to go beyond someone, right? But it is positive. And still in the spiritual community, you can think that, like you see someone comes for 1 meditation class, you try to come for twice, to 2 meditation classes. It's positive, it's helping you, right? That's why it is positive. It can help you. It can give you much experience, right? Much knowledge in the Dhamma. So in that way, it can turn out to be positive. But still, it's a mental impurity. Okay? And then conceit, the mana, elevation of the mind on account of social class, etc. So the conceit, the mana, so which is very general, to have that conceit. It is with comparing others, comparing with others, comparing with yourself with others, you feel that conceit in different conditions, in different experiences. And arrogance, atimana. So these two are connected. The arrogance is the extreme elevation of the mind, so that's a level of the same conceit, but it can be very emotionally very strong, arrogance. And vanity, mother. So that is also a very powerful mental impurity, defilement, mother. As it explains in the Dhamma, it is the intoxication. So people are intoxicated by different conditions, not only by alcohol, drugs and these things, but people in life, in general life, in the social life, people are intoxicated by different conditions. As it explains in the Dhamma, they can intoxicated by the youth, in their age. Sometimes we can see in the young generations that they are kind of infatuated, they are kind of intoxicated by their age, young age. So that can lead to that kind of arrogance, conceit. They think that they can do anything, unlike others, their parents or elderly people, they can do anything. That's how they think, right? So that becomes a kind of intoxication. And also another intoxication can be the health, good health. So when you are physically and mentally okay, you feel the same. You can feel the same. You take it for granted. So you act like you are not going to get sick and you are not going to get any physical or mental problems, right? So you can become very arrogant in front of sick people, other people around you. So it also can be another intoxication, a drug kind of. And the other powerful intoxication is the life itself. Jivita, mother, we call. That is where people live like they are not going to die. And they are going to be there forever. So that is the intoxication of life itself. Jivita, mother. That can lead to so many negative conditions, That's where people have no sense of values, appreciation of good life, positive, wholesome life, avoiding bad and negative conditions in life. So these kind of negative outcomes can happen with that powerful intoxication of life itself. So that is the vanity. The last but not the least, it is the negligence, which is the pamada, which is a very common defilement a negative mental condition for many other negative actions. Appamada is the opposite. Appamada is the opposite of negligence, which is the diligence. To act in diligence in this spiritual path, whatever positive and beneficial for you. So the negligence is also very common negative mental conditions, letting the mind roam among the objects of sensual pleasure. So if one's mind is always around these worldly pleasures, in the very superficial level, without going into very deeper, subtler levels of life and experience, in the very superficial level, they become very happy when there are things to get excited, and they can be very unhappy when things go wrong, when negative things happen. So this is the superficial normal level of that living, right? So that is a kind of negligence according to the Dhamma, But in the Dhamma, it is explained in different ways actually. The negligence sometimes means to be unmindful. If you are not mindful, you are kind of negligent. Because of that negative quality of not being mindful enough, anything can happen to you. Any negativity, any of these mental impurities can occur to you, right? So therefore we can see mindfulness plays a major role in that purification of the mind, right? So therefore the negligence, pamada, heedlessness, is a very powerful negative mental condition, impurity. So these are the 16 mental impurities. Do we have all these things? What do you think?
More than 16, right?
I do.
You do? Right. So, any thought on these mental impurities? Mainly in the Dhamma, so these are called Upakkilesa. Kilesa means the defilements. Simply means actually some related or minor can be. But we have major common mental impurities taught in the Dhamma, and they can be the root causes of all mental impurities. They are known as the Lobha, Dosa and Moha. Lobha, Dosa, Moha. So these are the three common categories of all mental impurities. The Lobha is the attachment, the desire, craving. Dosa is the anger, aversion, and Moha is the ignorance. So these are the most powerful three common mental impurities. So these are kind of the manifestation of these roots in different levels, in different ways. Okay. Therefore, they are called the Upakkilesas. And as we understand how these mental impurities are happening to us, where they can occur, do we have them? How they influence us? How they can bring us unhappiness, suffering eventually? It's a very interesting question to ask, even to observe them, how they are manifesting, how they are affecting us in our everyday life. They are very subtle when you come to know them, different levels of these defilements. As we can see, if you are to categorize some of these defilements, they are having the root of attachment or the craving, the lobha, and some of they are having the same root of aversion. This is how you can categorize them, but they are manifesting in very subtle ways in our everyday life. Therefore, they are very hard to see, very difficult to observe, but they are eventually bringing us unnecessary tension, anxieties, worries, all these things. Whatever you call these negativities in life, can be the depression, Sometimes people have a hard time forgetting something, the past, hard to let go. Something bothered you in the past. So you can find some roots in these mental impurities, defilements. These are the root causes of these discomforts, negative experiences. So therefore, in the teachings of the Buddha, he clearly explains these mental impurities in very subtle ways. They are mental conditions, and we have been following them. We have been carrying them for a long time. Not only in this life, it can be coming from our previous lives. So they can be kind of habits in our system. So that way they can be very difficult to let go, even to control. And the other misleading nature of these mental impurities is the disguise quality. They come in disguise. That means they are deceiving you sometimes. You think that, oh, it's okay. You try to justify some of these conditions when they happen to you, but in the deeper root levels, they are still negative. So in that nature, we hardly discriminate them, right? Because we don't like to blame us. Our mind does not like when it gets discriminated, questioned even. So therefore, people have very limited knowledge about these mental impurities. But in the Buddhist psychology, we can understand the way to the real inner peace, happiness and tranquility is the control of these negative conditions, mental impurities. So even though it is hard to accept, for some people, when some people go about a huge problem, complaining so many things, other people, eventually if you really dig into the core of the problem, it is these mental impurities in that same mind. We like to project them outside, or someone else, your husband, your wife, your children. Because of that fact, we don't like to blame us. We try to see the problem in others and blame them instead of oneself. But eventually, in the practical level, it is our mind, it is our mental impurity that actually these negative conditions, defilements are the ones bringing us these negative experiences. So it's a kind of the humbleness, I see. When you accept that fact, the problem is with me, which is very hard to accept. You become very humble. You simply accept that, oh, it's my fault, it's my problem. You don't try to put the blame on someone else, which is the very common way of human life, in society. So it's very interesting, therefore, to learn about these mental impurities, how they are affecting our life, our relationships, and overall our entire life, when you think about the true meaning of our life. So as we continue this discourse, after giving explanation about the 16 different defilements, Buddha explains, when in the monk who thus knows that these all 16 defilements are defilements of the mind, and that spiritual person, this ill will has been abandoned, and that person, when that person comes to know clearly the nature of these mental defilements, how they are bringing the unhappiness and suffering, that person abandoned them. So abandoning is a very important word here, the abandonment of the defilements. So as I explained earlier, it is the purpose of this spiritual practice to abandon these, to get rid of these mental impurities. If they are bringing us the unhappiness and suffering, the purpose of this practice is to completely let go of these mental impurities. Okay. So that person, that monk, simply abandoned them with that understanding. Okay, so the abandoning has different levels in the Dhamma. It is not explained here, but for your knowledge, we need to know. It can be very practical for you. The abandoning of these mental impurities, defilements, are happening in 3 stages. The first one is called the Tadangappahana. Tadangappahana means you sometimes replace these mental impurities with positive ones, positive conditions. Okay? Like when you have anger, you replace that with what? When you have anger, you can replace that with the positive one of loving kindness, maitri, metta, right? For the lobha or the stinginess, so people practice generosity. They try to give away things, right? For that moment of practicing generosity, you have control. You have abandoned that stinginess, right? For the moment of practicing metta, loving kindness, you have control. You have abandoned the anger, aversion for that moment. So that is the first level of abandoning the defilements. You replace them with the positive qualities, spiritual qualities. But they are very temporary. Just for that moment, it can be abandoned, right? You can control them. They can come back. They can occur to you whenever these things trigger in yourself, right? So that is the first level of abandoning the mental impurities. The second one is, so before going to the second one actually, the first level of controlling these kilesas actually practiced mostly in the practice of the sila, right? The sila, the morality. You undertake these precepts, right? Instead of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, you develop these positive conditions, positive behavior. You replace them with the positive qualities, right? So that is the sila practice. And then the second level is the abandoning of these mental impurities by suppressing. You control them in a kind of firm level, which is through the samadhi practice, right? Whenever you meditate, when you meditate, especially the tranquilizing meditations, samatha meditations, you abandon these mental impurities to extended time, extended level. That is called the Vikkambanapahana. So that is the second level of abandoning the mental impurities by suppressing them, that you are not letting them arise in yourself. As you are positively engaged in a wholesome object of meditation, your mind has no room for these negative mental conditions to arise. Right? It's a kind of firm level of abandoning the mental defilements, but that also subject to change. It also can change, right? It can happen only when you are in meditation, only when you suppress them consciously, mindfully, with your effort. That much you can have the control, but soon after you wake up from meditation, any of these mental impurities can happen to you again, right? That is the second level. And the third level is called the Upakkilesa, which is the complete eradication of, the complete abandoning of these mental impurities, which is gained through the wisdom practice, right? Wisdom practice, panya, we call. That is the complete understanding of how these mental defilements, how this body and mind work, and all this complete understanding, the complete understanding of the whole drama here. You can bring your understanding here into the complete practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The understanding of the three universal characteristics even. Anicca, dukkha, anatta, right? Impermanence, suffering and non-self, and the teachings of dependent originations, how all these conditions are happening as a result of the causality, and all these things. The wisdom, that right understanding eventually helps us eradicating all these mental impurities permanently. So that is the ultimate purification of the mind, right? So now you know the three levels of abandoning these defilements, okay? So when monks especially have that has that understanding about the mental impurities, that monks simply try to abandon them, that completely let go of them. So when that practice is going on, when that person comes to know that these mental impurities conditions are abandoned or completely controlled in mind, that person develops the unwavering confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, the triple gem we call, the teacher, the great master, the Buddha, the person who explained all these things to us. And then that person completely understands who the Buddha is, what type of special teacher, person is the Buddha, right? And what he realized even in that understanding. So he gets to know more about the Dhamma, the purpose of the Dhamma, practice, the goal of it, right? And then that person really appreciates the spiritual community, which is the Sangha. So that is the unwavering confidence in the triple gem, which is a very special stage of this spiritual path, right? Until we get to that level, so people can see some ups and downs in the practice, because their confidence is not firm enough to continue in the practice. So that is gained through the controlling of or abandoning of these mental impurities very practically. And then because of that unwavering confidence, that person enjoys it. If you look at the number 10, he knows I have given up, renounced, let go, abandoned and relinquished in part, and he gains enthusiasm for the goal. Okay, these steps are very important in the practice, the path. This is the kind of sequence as we can see. Okay, so that person gains the enthusiasm for the goal, and gains enthusiasm for the Dhamma, gains gladness connected with the Dhamma. So this is a kind of place that person gets to enjoy the Dhamma, his or her practice itself, because seeing that mental purity, when that person becomes free from this unnecessary suffering, negativities, due to that purification of the mind, that person really enjoys it. It becomes a living experience for that person. That is very important, And then, when he is gladdened, joy is born in him, right? So this is a kind of mental practice now. In a meditative level, the joy occurs to him in his mind. As his mind is so pure, as it becomes very radiant, he or she enjoys that practice within that meditative level. And being joyous in mind, his body becomes tranquil. When his body is tranquil, he feels happiness, and the mind of him who is happy becomes concentrated. So this is how it explains in the Dhamma, how someone is gained this real concentrated mind, centered mind, in a sequence, not right away, right? This is very important to understand. In sequence, this is how we are supposed to gain that mental purity, concentration, samadhi. It is by having these, as you can see, in a kind of gradual training, right? We started with these behavioral changes, right? This is the meaning of controlling and abandoning these mental impurities. And then that reflects our inner purity. When you become conscious about your own mental purity, it becomes something that you really enjoy and appreciate. And that affects your physical body even. You know, your body can become very tranquil because of your mental purity, right? And that happiness actually resides in the concentration, that samadhi. It is a level of kind of meditation practice actually. It's a highly spiritual level, okay, in the path. If monks, a monk of such a virtue, such concentration and such wisdom, eats alms food, consisting of choice hill rice, together with various sauces and curries, even that will be no obstacle for him. So, what does that simply mean? It's very simple but very important, as it sounds. So, if someone has all these qualities, which simply means his or her, he or she is a very highly spiritual person. That's the meaning. What this statement exactly means is that he can enjoy anything. This is important. He can enjoy anything. He or she appreciate anything, but they would not affect the mind. They would not bring any of these mental impurities. That is the meaning. If you can remember the discussion on the Indriya Bhavana Sutta, the controlling or the development of the faculties, when you have the better or the perfect control of your sensory experiences with proper awareness, you do not easily get caught up in these negative conditions. No matter what you do, no matter where you are and who you are dealing with, these external experiences would not affect your internal system. That is the simple idea. So this hill rice considered to be a very highly regarded, food maybe, we have in the sutras, we call it the alhal or something, maybe some rich food, you name it. Whatever you eat, very delicious, but even these simple things are very simple, but they are enough for some people to have so much craving, attachment, to have big stories out of these things. But yeah.
Does that mean that you are indifferent whether it's good or bad? Is that the idea?
Yeah, kind of. Exactly. You don't simply differentiate them because you really watch your mind. Whenever you enjoy anything, whenever you do certain things, you are always connected with your inner experience. So then, knowing that nature of these mental impurities, as you have gained a better control over them, these mental impurities would not sneak in your mind. So that is the simple meaning there. Okay, and then number 12, he abides having suffused with the mind of loving kindness. So then another practice, as a very common teaching in the gradual path, gradual training, in such a level that person practices the loving kindness, the metta, in such a way that spreading the same loving kindness to all directions as we practice the loving kindness meditation here. So we learn that technique. So he lives a very compassionate life, loving all living beings. So when the mind is so pure and completely abandoned these mental impurities, what is left that mind with is this loving kindness and compassion. Just like the Buddha's mind, when he completely let go of all these mental impurities, what was left in his mind was the wisdom and the compassion. Eventually, the perfect understanding and the compassion for all beings, knowing simply, how people are suffering, not having this knowledge, this purification of the mind. So you naturally develop that loving kindness and compassion as a result of that practice. Okay? And then he, number 13, he understands what exists, what is low, what is excellent, and what escape there is from this field of perception. So this is kind of getting into a deeper level of the practice, complete understanding of the 5 aggregates, the meaning of this life, this body and mind existence, the true nature. So as a complete understanding of that teaching, that is the way to complete it, complete the spiritual journey, gaining this perfect knowledge, understanding. So that is the end of the path, reaching the ultimate goal of the enlightenment, as a result of purification of the mind, the complete abandoning of all mental impurities. Right? So this is a very simple way of understanding, explaining the enlightenment, the ultimate happiness through the complete purification of the mind. So there are a lot to talk about this topic, but we have limited time. We can find a lot of teachings on this topic, the mental impurities and the nature of the radiant mind, the purified mind, how it is important to achieve these higher achievements in the spiritual attainments, So we can simply incorporate this knowledge with our everyday life, our experience, even with our practice, so we can see our progress in that way. So do we have any questions or comments? Yes.
Where do you draw the line between being diligent and becoming rigid?
That is important. Yeah, it is explained as, when we try hard, right? When we try so hard, we always explain, we always teach people, whenever they want to try so hard with so much energy, we always have to try with diligence without letting that cause us anxiety or restlessness. So it's a kind of balancing that energy. So people try so hard, and that energy still can disturb that person. It can create such anxiety. Therefore we call it very well balanced. That's why we always call the effort and wisdom and mindfulness should go together. This is how we balance it out. If we do not have right mindfulness when we try so hard, and when we don't have right understanding what you are trying, what you are doing, what you really expect from this, the lack of knowledge about the techniques even, and then that effort can distract you. It can really cause you restlessness. Okay? Yes.
What's really ill will? It says the 9 cases of aversion.
Right. It is ill will, actually, as I explained earlier. So you kind of keep it for some time, that type of anger, but it explains about the 9 type of anger, right? But it is, as I explained earlier, I don't exactly remember these 9 cases. Like as I explained earlier, like if you have a good friend of yours, right? So someone blames that person or criticizes that person. So you develop anger for that blaming person, right? If there's a negative person in your life, maybe your enemy. So if someone praises that negative person, you get angry. So that kind of aversions, so they kind of last in your mind, unlike the simple superficial anger. Yes, yeah,
Still
it can be ongoing, yeah, and eventually they can lead to even actions, right? Taking revenge, hurting those individuals in that direction.
And at the very end, when it says elimination of defilements,
Mhm.
there are like three of those, and I would think the first one should be the easiest ones. Like,
Uh-huh.
is it by like definition, like the first six is
Yeah,
when
yeah.
the path of spring end.
Mhm.
Like the last six should be the most difficult.
Yeah, it
ones.
kind of, yes. Hmm. Yeah, we can see that, right? When you look at the list actually, so the initial ones can be very kind of superficial, like, in the outer levels of our experience, in our everyday life as we interact with them. So they kind of categorized in different levels of stages of enlightenment. Definitely it has to be in that way, right? Because they are the superficial ones, easily can be seen.
The number one is who becomes so one, right?
Sotapanna, yes, the
Sotapanna.
stream entry level, right? Content, insolence, envy, stinginess, deceit, fraud. So, as you can see, so these are kind of behavior aspects of it, right? These mental impurities, how they manifest in our everyday life. So that is what that is where we gain the better control in the first stage. So then it progresses in the spiritual journey. We get into the mental level, like deeper, subtler levels of these mental impurities, as we can see. Anything else? Okay, then I think that will be good enough today. All right, so thank you very much and all the blessings to you. Sadhu, sadhu.